we'll go ahead and start. So welcome to the first Library Science Talk of 2023. These series of talks, it's collaboration, contributions from the Zentralbibliothek Zurich and CERN and the ALIS, Association of International Librarians and Information Specialists. So we're really excited to have today Reinhard Altenhöner. He's the Deputy General Director of the Staatsbibliothek in Berlin, and he's had a focus lately on digital services and process reorganization. So technical and strategic. It's going to be a really interesting talk today. This is on self-organization and cooperation using the example of the FID system, the Specialized Information Services within the German libraries, as systemic supporters of the information infrastructure. The slides that he has will be sharing for our colleagues online. And there's also within the description of this YouTube video that you're watching, you'll see a link to a form where you can submit your questions. So throughout the session, if you have any questions you'd like to ask the speaker, we'll be gathering them here, and then we can ask him here in the room. And we're really pleased to be streaming from the UN Library and Archives Geneva. It's special for us to have colleagues back here in person and to be able to connect with you online as well. Kind of the best of both worlds. So I'll hand over now, and I'm excited to have this talk. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to go a bit for the camera. I hope it's fine now if I stand here. So yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Wow. And it's nice to be again in Ghent. I think the third time I checked, I numbered in private times, but my first stay here is about 50 years ago. So it's not really relevant for being in here for professional reasons. But I've got a visit to the library, and I'm very, very impressed here, the campus situation of the UN. Thank you very much, Rachel. And yeah, I'm now here to tell you a little bit about our initiatives in Germany, or especially one initiative. And beside of my professional job, I'm heading currently it's this FID system, and I will explain it a bit more. And I'm heading the board of the institutional headings of all these kind of colleagues, staff, people doing services. And that's an interesting matter, I think, for the changes we have to face in our infrastructure and in our different understanding of what libraries are doing today. And I would like to give you some ideas what we are doing, and I hope we will have a nice discussion later on, having this in mind, this presentation. But if you would like to give me a question in between of the talk, please do not hesitate, do it. No problem for me. Let's give you a short overview. My agenda is primarily to explain a little bit what we are doing here in this Specialized Information Service program, in German Fachinformationssystem. Some people here are able to understand German, so this is to make this a little bit more clear. And then I have to face some changing conditions, and then the question rise up, why build a network? We have single institution with a very specialized service, very successful. So what's the reason to build a network? And then I will introduce you to some organizational issues we have established within the network. What are the roles? What are the tasks? What are the responsibilities here? And this will help to understand our key aspects during the implementation phase for this network, what we are doing so far here, with which kind of responsibilities. And I've picked up one example, the technology board, which has just started beginning of this year. And I will finally close with some remarks or perspectives I see or we see in the development of this network structure or infrastructure development of a network in the sense of an infrastructure, part of an infrastructure. Let me start with this Specialized Information Services program. This is a program by the Research Foundation, Deutsche Forschung, which is the major research foundation in Germany, one can say, especially for the whole disciplinary tasks you face in the academia and the universities or other research institutions. The budget is about 2 and something billions of euro a year, and a part of the initiatives of the German Research Foundation is, of course, the foundation of these so-called Fachinformationsdienste. The funding currently is about 30 million a year, so you can imagine that this is not really a small fish in the big ocean of information infrastructure, and especially if you consider that the institutions spend their own money into the pocket of the funding money from the German Research Foundation. So similar situation like in Switzerland, where you have these Swiss universities, diverse programs, usually established by taking money from the national level and join this money with the initiatives in the institutions, and then you can catalyze different initiatives to bring them up. The origin of this Fachinformationsdienste was a service founded in the beginning of the, end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s of the last century. There were former programs, but this was the idea that at one place in Germany, every kind of information literature has to be available. So it's a worldwide, a global program to make sure that all items in the scientific world are at one point reachable for users. So, of course, it's clear it's a very specialized service for the extremely specialized research you have to consider in the academia and in university and out university research institutions. So basically this was on literature, and this service was more or less built on the idea that one have to buy items at that time when they appear, waiting for the point this item is used or relevant for a scientific research activity. So in German we called it Bestandsaufbau, bestandsbezogen, bestandsbewahrender oder vorausgreifender Bestandsaufbau, so the development of a collection in advance for the future use. And I will give you some information on that, why this changed, but you can imagine that especially e-information is one of the big issues or big triggers to change that. And on the other hand, we have a more and more advanced system of dedicated service for specified disciplines. So they differ, for sure. So you have on the one hand the humanities, that you have on the other hand the more scientific or hard sciences, and they have other demands than the humanities, and therefore services around these data are developed. We have two core principles in these Fachinformationsdienste, specialized services. The one is the clear focus on research communities demand. So we have to be very strong, close to the researchers, to the people who do research, to do science. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have to make sure that all the activities or the actions are just more than the ground service you usually have to expect if you are in a university institution. So this is this point of the specialized demand. In contrary to the day-to-day work in a scientific environment, means that most of the demands are fulfilled by the local or regional institutions, libraries and other institutions, and here the specialized demand is really in focus. That is basically the mind, and I will show you an example from my library. We are driving the Fachinformationsdienst across Asia, And this is a service with a long tradition. On the one hand, we have big collections in the library, and this service is more and more migrated to a new information service. And as you can see, it's belonged to Chinese language and culture area, to Japan, Korea, Central Asia, including Mongolia and Central Asia regions in the People's Republic of China, and even Southeast Asia. So it's a big area, and in the core, or the nutshell, the service is for the university and non-university, so science, research, and all research-related teaching you have around Asia. And it's a global task, you can imagine. So Asia-related sciences in all their aspects, mostly or most related to philologies, but even to area studies, regional studies, and beyond, what you can expect around. And so this means, especially in this region which is from the outside view maybe similar to, say, Asia, but if you are there, you know there are a lot of differences, like they see if you come to Europe. So it's disciplinary, it's interdisciplinary, it's transdisciplinary, it's regional, it's interregional, and it's, of course, transregional, because you have a lot of other bindings over the frontiers from political or historical reasons. And it's cultural, it's intercultural, it's transcultural, for sure. So we are a driver for many, many sciences, partly strongly from the different Asia philologies, but even with some drivers around that, which means, for example, we're talking about climate studies, for example, could be an example to understand how in the Asia region climate change is discussed, and so on and so on. So it's a huge approach, and we do it by a strong network of partners internationally and locally, regionally, nationally, looking for experts who can give us some consultancy on different aspects of future developments. It's a long tail story here, because it's sometimes not so easy to get material. For example, websites in this area, PRC, for example, to get are difficult to get them stable, things like that. It's sometimes very difficult to get information, to get literature and things like that. That all belongs to that, and we need people who are able to understand the region, to explain the region, and to help us, especially, for example, for journeys in this area. So it's a big focus, and this moved, so this is due to the region, including southern border of Indonesia, for example. So if you consider the whole globe, you can see it's a big part of it, and it's not just in the core of our focus usually. So this is the basic, the know-how for that. And taking a look closer, it's unfortunately in German, but you can see, so from the one point of view, we have the classical literature information we do. We have the e-resources in an ongoing and increasing manner. And we, of course, and it's a strong change in terms of what are our key points in this Fachinformationsdienst. The work with data, so say research data, the output we get from different projects, from digitization projects, for example, or from country itself, statistical data, data from masses of publications, and this all together, we bring it to this cross-Asia item with several services on publications, on standardization, on, or what you mind, what you can get in your mind on that. This is only to show you one example. If you go further into the areas of activity, we have on the one hand this historically driven collections we have in this area. This is for historic reasons. The library is old, it's founded in 1660, and especially Asia was in the focus. And we try to transfer this material into digitized objects. And this is much more than only access reading. We do, for example, engram data to have a specified scientific-driven access to these data in kind of networks, historical networks, for example. We establish added values beyond this access restriction we have with electronic materials. So we need for digital scholarship a lot of contracting with all the information holders in the Asian room. And we try to do it in the way of the FAIR principles, as you can imagine. Information resources. This includes the approach to get everything worldwide what people ask for as a help for us. And we have a mix of different ways to fulfill this task, with pattern-driven acquisition models, with document on delivery, with digitization on demand, and so on. So it's a whole field, and this department with about 35 people is working mostly for this kind of stuff, and the funding, as you can see here, and I've noted here, maybe I can show you. No, on the right side, some view, it's in German, unfortunately, no, it's not in German, it's in German, and in the gray you can find the way how we finance it by our own pocket, and in red you can see the funding we've got from the external partner. It's not only the German Research Foundation, but some funders more. And that's the upper graph. And under that, below that, we find the relation between staffing and between or other stuff. And you can see the part of funding for staff is quite low. So we use the German Research Foundation program mostly for literature, information, things like that. But we take our staff into the work to get the material by using the money from the German Research Foundation. With regard to content management, some services, for example, we have this full text search and ITR service infrastructure. It's one of the biggest Fedora instances more worldwide with 100 million documents we have in. And therefore you can imagine that especially the retrieval in this kind of stuff is very challenging because it's on the one hand licensing problems. We are not allowed to do text and data mining, for example, so we have to find ways to cross over that. And we have here this, a complete suite of infrastructure. Please have a look to our services and you can get some information what we can do here as an example. We have this umbrella for research data, an increasing post. And yes, I've mentioned it, networking, feedback, sustainability actions to get in close access, close contact to our users, the best service we can make of. That's only an example. And jumping back to this Specialized Information Program, and you can take the example to share a bit the know about 34 of these Fachinformations, these Specialized Information Services, because they are more or less similar and they are very different, even in regard to the systematic view of disciplines or the matter they follow or the topics and so on and so on. But in principle, they are more or less directed services for special users, for special faculties. So same and different. So they have a high level of diversity, if you summarize a little bit. And yeah, you can say an individual identity. They are old. Some of them have more than 30, 40 years of history. This former program SSG and now this new program FID, Fachinformationsdienste, they have their own identity. And they have this sensitivity to disciplines, which means that they know the people. So they are present on the conferences or the different working events of disciplinary societies. So they are in a close relation to them. And they have, therefore, very, very close contact to the research communities, and they are driving force. They try to be in digital transformation. They do a lot of projecting and projects with them. So this is, on the one side, the strength, and it's a strong pillar in the infrastructure for literary information and services around. And on the other hand, there are challenges, there are changes, and we have the need to use more and more infrastructure, to use, for example, repository know-how to drive these services, data exchange, interoperability issues, things like that. And they have to do it in a framework of the institutional setting they have. And this is a tension between the demands from the Fachinformationsdienst on the one hand side, and on the other hand side from the infrastructure an institution is offering. And the next step is that we have services who are related to each other from one FID to another one. There's a tension, a challenge. The other challenge is that, driven by the basic or the principles of the German Research Foundation and their funding, that all these kind of FID are project-based. We have to ask again every 3 years, which means that we hire staff, and if you are, and we have some cases of that, FID is stopped by stopping the funding. The staff is going out and is fired more or less, and so a development process with a higher level of competency is stopped. That's a problem even for this kind of services. One can say that the long endurance you need to to advance in a service is even depending from the time and the years you have invested in that. So for the institutional purpose, it's difficult. For the people who work in such a FID, it's difficult, and even for the audience or for the customers, it's very difficult to understand this periodic term of refunding, which means even that you have to invest or you have to find innovation to explain why you need again funding. That's project-driven funding challenges. And this goes ahead with the problem that in these cases, these 34 FIDs are asking for funding again and again and again, and they've got individual evaluated. So there are the people from the community, from the disciplinary experts. There are some experts from information sciences and things like that in the evaluation process of the DFG. But it's difficult to see the value of one FID for the other ones. And with regard to transversal, interdisciplinary research, it becomes more and more challenging to be aware of these dependencies between different FIDs. So from different point of view, it becomes more and more important to bring these Fachinformationsdienste closer together and to address the need for, or the need to understand that here is a network of infrastructure institutions who work closely together, and they are in the end responsible for services not unified, but services who are related to each other. So sharing becomes completely other different and a meaning for the establishment and development of these kind of Fachinformationsdienste in a new way, in a networked way. And this is a starting situation for this Fachinformationsdienste network we have to face and we have to do, and we do since some years. Let me go on. So to go deeper in this situation, we have the situation that the Fachinformationsdienste are driven by individual demands on the one hand and their own communities, but we have the approach, or they have the effort that cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary needs are there and they have to be addressed. And we have, of course, similar or common digital methods over the different faculties in the different Fachinformationsdienste. And this is another challenge they have to face. So exchange between disciplines, exchange between the people who do the Fachinformationsdienste becomes more and more important, are becoming more and more important. And of course, research data becomes more and more important, even for the humanities. After well, I think they have some progress or they have some steps. There are some steps further. The hard sciences, but in the Switzerland or in Germany, the fact that humanities are working with data and are using data, from my point of view, from digitization collections or from other sources, becomes much more important. And here we have similarities in using this kind of data and similar profiles of competency you need. From this comes out, or one outcome of this is that the systemic value of a network, of this closer relationship between FIDs in terms of services, becomes much more important. So the understanding that a FID is not any longer a single value with a single dedicated community leads here to the fact that we need a much more driven view that the network and the quality of the network and the quality as a system becomes relevant. But difficult to grip, yeah? That's not so easy. So we need, or we have expectations to individual FIDs in terms of how they contribute to the network and to the building, to the build-up of the network. On the one hand, and we have a claim to effectively to build up on changing conditions we have around the whole system. And the answers are much more driven by the exchange between the libraries or between the informational institutions who are working within this FID circle. How do we do that? We try to go back on one hand to remember what are the origins, and I've done a little bit on that. And the German Research Foundation pressed us a little bit, you can say. After an evaluation period of Fachinformationsdienste, as a successor of these Sondersammelgebiete, SSG, it came out that one can do much more together, to say it simply, on the one hand. And on the other hand, and this is a basic or principal guideline the German Research Foundation is doing even in other areas, the level of self-organization has to be encouraged and has to be extended. How strong are organizations if they are able to self-organize their community, their common interests, their network? Could this be an answer to the challenges we have? And one example I name here later is the so-called rules of practice. In Germany, and I could assume even in other countries, German speaking especially, these kind of a collective book on what are the rules if I digitize a book, with very differentiated and clear ideas and the collection of all the things you have to consider. It's really and DFG in former times was the institution who stamped in the end on the text on the next versions of this practice, rules of practice, but they decided that they have to bring this back into the community. So libraries, archives, museums and other institutions have to do it on their own pocket and have to be aware that the community of well-organized negotiation processes leads to an open standard, you can say, how we do digitization, which makes sure that results of a digitization process can work in a different environment, not only in my own library or archive or museum or else. And this basic idea is one of the other drivers we have, and the reason, or this was one of the starting points to go into a position paper, strengthening cooperation and self-organization in the system of specialized information services, in August 19. This was, you can say, some sort of a starting point for this initiative. And then different stages of establishment began. And I will show you some of the steps we do, or we have done. And the other part, and this depends from the funding and the evaluation procedures of the DFG, we have the first criteria of the specificity, you can say, of the work of Informationsdienst. We have the basic idea, you can say, we have to do much more than for elementary purposes in an environment, in scientific environment we have to do. So this is specialization. And third, we have to evaluate the value of the contribution of a single FID for the network. But the interesting question is how you evaluate the contribution of a single FID, a single partner in a network, in a way that you go out with a result which says you get money, so much money or lesser money. All this is done in a dialogical development with the DFG. So we try to negotiate, to speak what we are doing, what they are doing, what they expect. So you can imagine that this is not even easy at any time. Yes, and one finally problem for the German Research Foundation, that was one of the reasons that they need this project-based funding, is that they are not allowed to fund projects longer than 12 years. Usually, that's the basic line or ground line. And so the question how we got funding over 12 years is a strong point in the programmatic calculation of funding programs in the DFG. So we have to find an answer. And especially at this point, how an institution contribute to the network is therefore especially really, really important for us and for the DFG. Yes, why build a network? So you've seen the pressure because of the funding rules, the regulation, you can say. And on the other hand, we have seen many advantages to go for a network. And so was the idea primarily to enhance the visibility, the exchange, the infrastructure of this network collaboration. So extend the idea to work together. It sounds very easy, but okay, some consequences for that. And the question behind is how can we show that synergies through cooperation can be moved up, especially, or as an example, for technical solutions. How can I make use of the advantages or the results of my partners in the network at another location or institution in Germany? And we decided at a very early stage or point of view to go for unique selling points for the drivers. What is the quality? What is it? It's about the unique selling points for this network. And so we came out with diversity as one of the original core points, core issues we have. On the other one hand, it's about the community-driven approach. So everything we do has to be justified by a clear seen requirement by members of the community, of the scientific community. We need understanding what's about reliability in our service environment. We need, of course, specific expertise in terms of, for example, everything around languages, around cataloging, indexing, and therefore we need some more force and power to change things in Germany, especially with regard to the standard databases, standardized databases, authority files, for example. Yeah, and the idea is to support, to increase the value of the network as a strong community and source of support for every members in the network. So move forward in the sense of that we try to encourage the self-efficiency of FIDs, of self-confident outward appearance of a system. So we are proud to be a part of this network. It's very important. And of course, we managed to write a roadmap for the whole member group in the network. You can see it on the right wing of the screen. And it's, I can say, not so easy to write with plenty of institutions together some sort of an action plan, some sort of a focus, given a paper who gives us a focus what about the aims for the 2020 to 24 period. This was one very important step we've done. Second aspect, we tried to organize our network. And this, you can see, is much more, it's in German, unfortunately, but I can explain it a bit. On the one hand, we have on the left side, internally, you can say the organization of the network with a coordination unit, on the one hand, with this board of directors, with some subgroups, many subgroups, and especially here the technic board, where we like to concentrate all activities around technology challenges. We have groups of experts, we have specialized working groups, and we have the platform where we present information about this network. And in addition, and you will see it again, we have many more networks in the network. So we decided that it's a good day to have smaller groups as networks between FIDs. And therefore we have technical networks, we have regional networks, we have faculty-based networks under the umbrella of the whole network. One bracket, I could say, or one strong wing is the competency center for licensing, they do services for the FID in terms of they license international resources for different FIDs. So we know that contracting is very difficult, and so they do the job for the FIDs in charge for the FIDs. And then we have in the network, or together with other libraries and other institutions on the one hand from the GLAM sector, partners, partnering with them, and we have a strong partnership with the National Research Data Initiative we have in Germany since 3 years now. From the external part, we have here some partners. It's not, we have partners, we have data networks, we have the authority files, we have the National Library, we have other infrastructure areas or infrastructures that we partner with. This view was helpful to understand where we are and who is going for some different negotiations and contracting with the other partners. The basic idea is, with this organization, we are better to influence the world around, and we are better to inform ourselves or to come up with managerial tasks and challenge and statements from the core of the network. Let's have a look to the different organizational units. The board of directors, on the one hand, with the organization, with the coordination office, is still in funding. It's not established really. It's only, we do it on our own pocket, you can say. The working level with the working group FID, more than 100 people, but in many subgroups divided. Working groups for thematic challenges. And we have these networks I've mentioned. We have the technical board with the mix of good representatives, representatives of the directors board and the working level, where we try to exchange and we try to analyze and go for strategic recommendations on infrastructural issues. I will give you an example. And we have this competency center for housing. It's working with funding from the DFG in the 4th period, I hope, next. And they do the contracting for the whole network with external partners. They collect the money and they negotiate the contracts for licensing. Here you have an overview about the topics and measures, and you can see here, the different areas. On the one hand here, the networks and the network work between the networks, the regional networks, technical networks. We have here the area of communication and public affairs. And we have here all the things around research data, which means our partnering with the NFDI and other partners with regard to research data. We try to focus on and we try to bring together our forces to join that. And here are some activities, services, and currently ongoing measures. We try to focus on that, but it's only for the overview to show you. We try to have a strategic view on that. Yeah, how to build up cooperation and infrastructure. On the one hand, we need these the reuse of technological solutions, which means, for example, many of the FIDs use Viewfind repositories or the Viewfind library to offer services for indexing and presenting, and therefore the people work together. Yeah, they do it. They share the experiences. They do have some sort of best practice recommendations, and we try to evaluate the best way. Cooperation in data management, especially for metadata management. The FIDs all over are a strong producer of metadata, and they share this data, and is cooperating in licensing issues, as mentioned in this competency center for licenses. Practically, we strengthen and we encourage the colleagues in the FIDs to found up new networks and to show these networks, to make them visible in order to enable people to jump in. And the same is for working groups. So if, for example, special topics, indexing comes up, we try to encourage that they do it more publicly in the network, and this works quite well, I think. We established some sort of regular exchange, and to use is the coffee lectures. So every 2 weeks, a coffee lecture for one FID is taking place, and all the other people can join and can learn from the internal view and the results of this FID. And we increase the activity of the contribution to the further development of the German authority file, as mentioned. So collecting different views on that and to jump in with the dedicated seat in this board helps to get more understanding from this internal point of view for indexing and cataloging data. As mentioned, the cooperative licensing and includes even common acquisition for the big contracts we need is another issue we try to enforce, and this works quite well. And the establishment, as named, of the technology board is very helpful for strategic recommendation. This board is not able to decide finally. This has to be done by the directors, but they do it, and they do it in a dedicated way. Other issue is to strengthen the existing communication channels. This is the topic field of communication, public affairs, and this public visibility of the system as a network is quite still underdeveloped, and we have to progress with that because the branch or the setting of this network has to be much more established. But we, I think, are on a good way. And this one of matter of fact is to go up with the international, maybe one can say this year, to being here to talk with colleagues from Switzerland is part of that, you can say. So I've had an exchange with Percé, a similar program in France. Something different, but some similarities. So we have done a big workshop with them. So, and the ALA is interested, and we have had a speaker in the ALA and things like that. So to make it internationally visible helps us to be nationally visible. So our duties here are the establishment or the establishing of the coordination office. This is the question of funding. We need money, and we're asking for that currently. And this will help us to professionalize public relations. We need some sort of a marketing communication concept because we do it much more in practice or with a very pragmatic approach in advance, but we do it to professionalize here. So that's one of the next steps we have to do. And this means even if you have a look to our platform, Webis, you will see that there are some sort of demand for innovation, like the library here. Yeah. So we need to have to change something and have to easily access points to use information and to enhance the version we have, especially for collaboration issues. So to share materials, to share and to communicate over the platform. There is a lack, I think, currently. Yes, and we have the regular meetings of the boards. So the personal contact is very important to bring this forward, even. And yeah, we present the new network in different forms. So, for example, for the German BiblioConf, we have plenty of presentations and discussion boards, panels to get in contact with other libraries, other institutions to explain them what we are doing and what are the advantages if they go up with us, follow us, and join maybe some groups. It's not a closed network in the sense of that no one else is here. For example, the OGS, I think you know that OGS community is related to our FID network, but there are some other members in. Very helpful and important. A very important issue for us is the area of research data. I mentioned the National Research Data Alliance or Initiative, Nationale Forschungsdateninfrastruktur, with a lot of money in the range of 10 years. And they know, and we have had some workshops with them, that we can offer a good and very valuable to that, which is more than 60%, so 2 from 3 FIDs are in a strong relation with the National Data Research Infrastructure campaign or alliance that they do, which means that we share experiences, we take dedicated tasks from them, for example, for the connection of publications and research data. Some parts are done from the library, some other parts are done from the scientific area in the NFDI. So this is working quite well. And for us, it's clear research data are very, very important for the libraries, especially for the Fachinformationsdienste. And we try to follow the path for going for a regular exchange and a regular service portfolio with the NFDI. Practical measures are these workshops, these level of community networking with the NFDI consortia. That's the organizational form they have. It's funny, but they have the same number of NFDI consortia like FIDs are there, but for different topics, I must say. It's not a completely well done mapping between the different units. We have obliged to, or we have stated that we are responsible for the relation between publication and publication, or published research data, and the relation to publications in terms of articles, papers, things like that. So that's one of our core duties or core availabilities we have, and we try to extend this. We are looking for consultancy services around research data, especially for the publication. And we have very good best practice examples to do that. So which means that we are not saying we do research data. We try to focus and to develop this profile for dedicated services around in this area. We have a working part in the circle of activities. And this coordination office with regard to RDM is one of the other points we try to establish this year, because we think it's important to have the anchor point or the point of contact doing that from the network perspective. Final point here in my presentation, the technical board. What we are doing with the technical board, I think it's clear that plenty of money, a lot of money is spent for technical development. And therefore we decided that we go up with some principles, some basic statements. The focus is on future development. We do not go back and consider the landscape we have in the past. It costs you much time, much money, much initiative, and it's not really, it's not a driver, it's more a stop event you usually do with that. So we go for the future, and we try to support dedicated initiatives who are able and who helps us to bring us further on with new technologies, with new services. And therefore, that's the reason why we say we go as a driver, we go not as a stopper. It follows a circle of basic principles of evaluation. And very important for us is the transparency and documentation area. So all the things we do are transparent and they are open documented. And this often offers the opportunity to get or to go real in reuse, in interoperability and synergy effects by reusing the results other colleagues have had in the other FID, for example. And as mentioned, the technical board goes for strategic recommendations, so it's not about a decision or a helpful practice paper for a dedicated solution. Therefore, we have the working groups. Yeah, and reuse and transfer, we try to be visible with the activities around the technical board, and we try to enable the transfer of the innovation we have in the network outside of the network. Yeah, to get us more visible, for, of course, for colleagues, for other activities, for example, in the NFDI. Other point of view, we do surveys for technical solutions. This has been made, and now we are in phase to recover that. So we have a good landscape of used technologies, and now we try to identify the best practices of that and to establish centers of competencies at dedicated FIDs to help the other ones. The perspective is to have something like a marketplace for solutions, and here are the first steps for the technical solution for this marketplace has started. Yeah, we would like to consolidate technical infrastructure to make it easier for all the FIDs, and we would like to make the reuse and the transfer developments much easier and much more as part of the day-to-day work of FIDs. And as mentioned, the recommendations on the strategic level will help us to have clear guidelines what the FID can do. Last slide. Perspectives. What we have achieved still now is a common roadmap from up to 24, as mentioned, this action plan. We have, I think, much more attention and much more awareness on the value of a FID network. We are still in debates, especially or even with funders, but I think we have got good progress on that. We have a much more intensified dialogue and exchange between the different parts and members of the networks. So the feeling that there is a network and the quality of the network has really increased. And we have established real existing cooperations with other partners, especially with an NFDI, and for example the G&D, where we get a seat in their board. What we want to achieve in the next time, further steps for this infrastructure consolidation. So we have to do a lot to be more sure that we can export good results, good success stories from one FID to another one, and then from the FID output to the infrastructure in Germany or elsewhere. We have the need to build up this collaboration platform, as mentioned. That's still not sufficient what we have done here. And we would like to go for the a stronger branding of the FID network in the future. Some steps are done, but as mentioned, we need some sort of a more professional management or marketing and communication plan and people who do that and things like that. So that's the point where we are just now to bring this out, and I hope that we will do it in the next months, and the FID network will become much more visible, I think, and helpful for the members and for the other nations, other partners outside of this FID system. So.
Thank you so much. It's so complicated, so complex, all of this you're pulling together, and it's so interesting to hear the strategies you're developing and also how well you're really keeping track of monitoring and evaluating and showing the value of those services. That was really enriching for us. Thank you. I know from home there are some a few questions that came on the Menti. We have maybe a few more minutes to go over. I don't know in the room if there was anything before we. Yes. Okay. I'll bring the microphone over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very dense and it was complex, like Rachel said, but it still seems like it's an enormous undertaking, obviously, right? So congratulations on all that, because there's so much thinking behind the management of all it. For sake of time, I have a question that came to my mind, because in the very beginning you said that it's also about innovation, obviously. Innovation also being the driver for it, possibly making it sustainable after the 12 years, right? So when we here at the UN, we talk about innovation, or we have our courses about innovation, it speaks about culture change. So we're always trying to see, how can we measure culture change? Do we change our cultures? How do you feel about that with those this FID network? Did it come up with a culture change, and how does innovation come to the fore actually within this complex system?
I have the mic here, so it's easy. Difficult question. I would. My first reaction would be to talk with you much more about cultural change institutions. The FID network is not an institution, so we are able to govern a little bit the activities for these public view on FID and the services they offer on the one hand. And I think that, yes, it's about a cultural change, especially the question, and maybe my first idea was how you do it in an organization, like you mentioned, the UN, UN at whole, and the library, archives. And I think in the Staatsbibliothek, the State Library, we have the same changes with regard to the cultural behavior, a lot of aspects. With regard to the FID network, I would say, yes, there is a change, it's a move in the sense of that the idea that you are not very closely related to your community at all. You have even your partners, and partnering with the other FIDs is very helpful. This becomes much more power, I think, and this changes the way how people communicate with each other. And you must consider that they are in a competency, you can say. So is this competition? It's a competitional situation to ask for FIDs, and some of them dropped out in the last period. And therefore, it's very interesting, but I think for most of the people it's clear that you can't do it on your own pocket, and you will lose your FID if you stay in your very limited frame and neglecting everything what you can do with other colleagues. So the pressure from the funders on the one hand, yes, they have to show that they are part of a network and they contribute practically to the network is one important point. But the other is the value they've got from the exchange, from the support they have from the network. And so I think this is a cultural change. In former times, competition was more or less out, and they could do the jobs closely related to a dedicated and very fixed community. And this is open now. So in this sense, openness is one issue. Yeah. Mm.
Maybe I can pull a question from the mentee from home. So maybe somewhat related to this previous question, are you asked to demonstrate your impact on society at large? And if this is not the case, do you think that this will be required in the future?
So
impact on
the whole society. Yeah, it's maybe similar to the question, what's about the role of libraries in society? And if you consider different types of libraries, it's the question for libraries in general. For the FIDs, I would say they are strongly related maybe to the question or the point that the demand or the requirements on science to be more publicly visible and sensible, citizen science as a keyword, is maybe an issue. I confess that I haven't considered really it for the FIDs, but I could imagine that this could be a really relevant topic to explain a bit more and to help, of course, the scientific community to be more present in the society. Is one possibility, but to be honest, I think mostly our services are related to the directly to the work of the people who use our services. In former times, I could consider that some more projects where the roles of people who learn and the roles of people who teach could more changeable, and librarians and other people in the scientific community work much more together on dedicated projects they do, from my point of view, on a platform of the FID. And in this sense, maybe this huge approach to be part of the society, a visible part of society, can increase. But I'd be a little bit reluctant to really say, yes, that's the way we have to do it. Mm.
Be difficult. Were there any other questions from in the?
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So my question is, you mentioned that you're going to strengthen the FID as a brand.
Mm-hmm.
You're still working on the brand. And I was wondering why you haven't achieved that yet, because I would imagine that maybe being part of the FID is very prestigious. So the idea of creating a brand maybe would have come first. Why are you still working on this, creating a brand for the enterprise?
Yeah, still now, or in former times, the brand, and if you go for websites of FIDs, they are completely different, and they are partly very individual. And they are related to a dedicated community. And the evaluation process asks us for the dedicated communities. Please count how many people you reach. Please count for the potentials you have in your community or in your discipline. And therefore, and I taught you about the identity, and it's sometimes for 20, 30 years and more an existing identity of a FID. That's the other part of the game. And my talk on a brand is not a brand who overwhelms everything in terms of an individual FID. It's more about some points you remember if you've seen another FID. It's not about the loss of control for the identity and the individual FID web page, for example, or dedicated services. So FID will be very different because the communities are very different. But we think that some sort of connecting identifiable parts of visible signs as mark or as brand FID would be very helpful, especially for this interdisciplinary and this transversal interest we have to consider for the future. So it's difficult to say here is the border, and now you leave the safe area of the FID-A, and you have to go to FID-B, and you have to completely different environment. So this means that dedicated functionalities, for example, should be similar in the sense of how they work. So this interrelation grammar should be similar. But of course, this is a difficult question, and we will have plenty of debates on that, yeah, for sure. We have decided on a very top level that we need some sort of a brand, and how we proceed that in the dedicated FIDs, it's not really sure and clear. But you have addressed the right point. It's difficult. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With this one, I think we will let you rest for tonight. You have another talk tomorrow in Zurich. But really, so grateful to you and very interested. I'm sure you'll have more context from our colleagues here with further questions and ideas that you've given us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.